The emergency meeting hall on Galaxis Prime buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the known galaxy gathered in desperate council. Ambassador Thielen of the Karathi Collective stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he activated the holographic display. The image that appeared made every being in the room fall silent with dread. 3 entire worlds gone. Not destroyed in the traditional sense of orbital bombardment or stellar collapse, but consumed. The planets still existed in their proper orbits, but they were now barren husks of rock and metal, stripped of every organic molecule down to the bedrock. The scourge had fed well. We have tried everything, Thielen announced to the assembled delegates. His voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of galactic civilization. Our most powerful weapons barely scratch their bioships. Our strongest defenses crumble within hours of contact. Traditional warfare has proven useless against an enemy that grows stronger with every victory in the viewing galleries above. Representatives from hundreds of civilized worlds watched with growing horror. The Zilani Confederacy, masters of energy, manipulation, had seen their plasma cannons absorbed and converted into scourge biomass. The Tekari Republic, renowned for their defensive technologies, watched their shield generators fail as the enemy simply ate through the power sources. Even the ancient Vorthani Empire, with their crystalline dreadnoughts that had maintained galactic peace for millennia, had been forced to retreat from scourge-held systems. There is one option remaining, Thielen continued, and the room grew even quieter. The Deathworld Alliance has agreed to consider emergency membership for a new species, one that our xenobiologists believe might possess the necessary traits to combat this threat. The Deathworld Alliance was legendary throughout the galaxy. A few civilized beings had ever seen its members in person. Formed from species that had evolved on the most hostile planets imaginable, they served as the galaxy's enforcers when diplomatic solutions failed. The crystalline Vorthok, who thrived under radiation that would cook most organic life. The silicon-based Nethri, whose homeworld's surface temperature could melt steel. The aquatic Deep Swern, who lived under crushing pressure in oceans so deep that light had never touched their cities. These beings were respected and feared in equal measure. When the Alliance spoke, civilized worlds listened. When they acted, problems disappeared. They had maintained the balance of power for 300 years. Asking nothing in return except to be left alone on their impossible worlds, the species in question calls themselves humans, Thielen said, and activated. New holographic display. They inhabit a world designated as Earth. It's located in what they call the Milky Way galaxy, approximately 50,000 light-years from our current position. The environmental data that appeared made several delegates gasp in shock. Gravity nearly twice that of standard civilized worlds. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most habitats. Temperature variations so extreme that water regularly froze, solid, or boiled away completely. Weather patterns that included rotating storm systems with winds strong enough to level cities. The planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, Thielen continued. By all reasonable standards, it should be uninhabitable. Yet not only do humans survive there, they've built a thriving civilization with a population exceeding 8 billion individuals. More disturbing data began to flow across the displays. The humans had a documented history of warfare spanning their entire recorded civilization. They had fought each other continuously, developing weapons of increasing sophistication and destructive power. Nuclear devices capable of sterilizing continents, chemical weapons that could poison entire ecosystems, biological agents designed to target specific genetic markers. Most concerning, Thielen said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, is their apparent psychological adaptation to their hostile environment. Human military doctrine appears to assume that any conflict will escalate to total destruction of the enemy. They do not appear to recognize concepts such as limited engagement or proportional response. The silence in the chamber stretched for long minutes as delegates absorbed this information. Finally, Senator Quall of the Rimward Coalition stood to speak. You are suggesting we invite a species of psychotic killers to join the most powerful military alliance in galactic history? I am suggesting, Thielen replied carefully, that we invite a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning to survive and thrive in conditions that would kill us all within minutes. The Scourge represents an existential threat to all organic life in the galaxy. Perhaps it requires beings who have spent millennia perfecting the art of existential warfare. The debate that followed was heated but brief. 3 more worlds had fallen to the Scourge while they argued. The mathematics of extinction were simple and unforgiving. Within 6 months, the expanding wave of consumption would reach the core worlds. Within a year, galactic civilization would cease to exist. Vote was close, but decisive. The invitation would be extended 3 days later. The human response arrived via quantum transmission. It was brief, written in what appeared to be multiple human languages. But the universal translator rendered it clearly. We accept your invitation. A diplomatic mission will arrive at the coordinates you provided within 14 standard days. We suggest you prepare appropriate briefing materials regarding your enemy. We will prepare appropriate solutions. The message was signed by someone called Ambassador Cross, representing something called the United Earth Defense Coalition. Attached were technical specifications for the human diplomatic vessel, along with a polite request for temporary orbital facilities capable of withstanding minor impacts and radiation exposure. When Admiral Keth of the Alliance Defense Force reviewed the specifications, he immediately ordered all civilian traffic cleared from the arrival zone. The human ship, according to its own documentation, was powered by controlled fusion reactions and armored with composite metallic materials. Designed for deep space operations in hostile environments, the ship that arrived was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Where civilized vessels were elegant curves designed for efficient space travel, the human craft was a collection of angular surfaces and redundant systems. It looked less like a diplomatic transport and more like a weapon designed to survive. Passage through a Star Ambassador Cross emerged from the docking tube wearing what appeared to be a simple, black uniform with minimal decoration. He was tall by civilized standards, with pale skin and dark hair, looking exactly like the species profiles had indicated. What the profiles had not captured was the sense of controlled power that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fusion. Core behind him walked to other humans in different uniforms. General Torres wore what was obviously military dress, with insignia that suggested high rank. Admiral Nova wore a naval uniform that somehow managed to look both ceremonial and practical. All 3 humans moved with the casual confidence of apex predators who had never encountered anything they could not overcome. Honored delegates. Cross said in perfectly accented galactic standard, "We thank you for your invitation to join the Deathworld Alliance. We have reviewed your briefing materials regarding the Scourge threat. We are prepared to contribute our expertise to this conflict." His smile was polite and professional, but something about it made every civilized being in the room suddenly remember that they were in the presence of creatures who had learned to kill before they had learned to build cities. The galaxy was about to discover why Earth was classified as a death world, and why sometimes the only solution to an impossible problem was to invite something even more dangerous to solve it. The transport vessel carrying the human delegation approached Bastion Prime with careful precision. The massive space station served as the training ground and coordination center for the Deathworld Alliance, a structure so heavily fortified that it could withstand direct assault from an entire battle fleet. Its rotating sections provided different environmental zones for each member species. From the superheated chambers where the Nethri felt comfortable to the crushing pressure tanks that the Deepsworn called Home Commander Ellis watched through the viewport as their shuttle passed through the station's defensive perimeter. The weapons arrays they passed were unlike anything in human databases, clearly designed by beings who understood warfare on a scale that most civilized species could not imagine. Each defensive platform looked capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. Impressive engineering, Admiral Nova commented from the seat beside him. They have built this facility to survive anything short of stellar collapse. General Torres studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The positioning suggests they expect attacks from multiple vectors simultaneously. These are not beings who fight defensive wars. Their shuttle docked in a bay specifically modified for their visit. Standard atmospheric pressure and temperature. Though Ellis noted the emergency environmental controls were easily accessible, their hosts were clearly prepared for the possibility that human requirements might change without warning. The delegation that met them represented the full spectrum of Deathworld Alliance leadership. Commander Zenth of the Vorthok stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body refracting the station's lighting into prismatic patterns. The radiation emanating from him would have been lethal to most organic life, but the humans showed no discomfort at his proximity. High Forge Malik of the Nethri glowed with internal heat that made the air around him shimmer. His silicon-based body was a work of living art, geometric patterns that shifted and flowed as he moved. The temperature in his immediate vicinity was hot enough to ignite most organic materials deep. Speaker Quinn of the Deepsworn moved in a specialized mobility suit filled with crushing pressure and super-chilled liquid. Her natural form was barely visible through the reinforced viewing ports. A mass of tentacles and bioluminescent patches adapted for life in the deepest ocean trenches. "Welcome to Bastion Prime," Commander Zenth said, his voice resonating through harmonic frequencies that most beings found uncomfortable. "We have prepared orientation materials and training scenarios to assess your capabilities." General Torres stepped forward with the measured pace of someone accustomed to command. "We appreciate your thoroughness. Our personnel are ready to begin." Immediately, the first surprise came during the environmental assessment. Alliance protocol required new members to undergo extensive testing to determine their operational parameters. The Vorthok needed radiation levels that would cook most organic tissue. Nethri required temperatures that could melt steel. Deepsworn operated under pressure that would crush standard equipment. The humans requested standard baseline conditions. High Forge Malik's internal glow flickered with what might have been confusion. These parameters would be considered paradise world conditions by most civilized species. You are certain your personnel can operate effectively in such a benign environment? Commander Ellis's response was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone he might use to discuss the weather. "Our homeworld conditions are somewhat more challenging than your baseline parameters. This environment will be quite comfortable for our teams." The first joint training exercise was scheduled for the following day. Alliance doctrine called for gradual integration, allowing new members to observe established tactics before attempting participation. The scenario was a standard Scourge assault simulation based on actual combat data from recent engagements. Alliance teams deployed according to centuries of refined doctrine. Vorthok formed defensive positions, their crystalline bodies providing cover, while their radiation fields created killing zones for approaching enemies. As the Nethri moved in coordinated patterns, using their plasma generation capabilities to create overlapping fields of fire. The Deepsworn anchored the formation, their natural armor absorbing enemy attacks, while their powerful limbs struck back with devastating force. The simulation enemy advanced in waves. Bioships that adapted to damage and grew stronger with each assault. Alliance teams held their positions, trading space for time while inflicting maximum casualties on the attacking force. It was a proven strategy that had served them well for 3 centuries. The humans observed for exactly 90 seconds. Colonel Beck gestured to his team with subtle hand signals that the Alliance observers barely noticed. The human soldiers moved, with fluid precision, not toward the enemy advance but around its flanks. Rather than meeting the Scourge head-on, they identified weak points in the formation and struck with surgical accuracy where Alliance doctrine called for holding ground and trading casualties. The humans treated terrain as a tool to be used. They led enemy units into kill zones, used elevation and cover to multiply their effectiveness, coordinated their movements with a level of tactical flexibility that left Alliance commanders struggling to follow their logic. The simulation ended not with the gradual grinding down of enemy forces that Alliance doctrine predicted, but with the sudden collapse of Scourge coordination as key command units were eliminated by precise human strikes. The silence that followed lasted for several uncomfortable minutes. Deep Speaker Quinn was the first to break the quiet. "Your tactics are highly unconventional. Alliance doctrine emphasizes defensive strength and sustained firepower." Captain Ward, who had led the human tactical team, responded with professional courtesy. "Defensive strategies work well when you have strategic depth to trade for time. Our homeworld experiences taught us that sometimes you need to end threats quickly before they can adapt to your defenses. The second revelation came during survival training on Kethmer, a world that Alliance members considered moderately challenging. The planet's surface featured temperature swings that could freeze or boil water, atmospheric pressure variations that required specialized equipment, weather patterns that included regular electrical storms capable of disrupting most technology Alliance. Teams deployed with full environmental suits and support equipment. Each species brought specialized gear designed for their particular needs, along with backup systems and emergency supplies sufficient for extended operations. Human team arrived wearing basic field uniforms and carrying equipment that looked almost primitive by Alliance standards. Major Fox led his squad across terrain that would have challenged experienced Alliance veterans, moving at a pace that suggested they found the environment merely inconvenient rather than hostile. When a plasma storm struck their position, the Alliance teams took shelter in reinforced bunkers and waited for the weather to pass. The humans adjusted their equipment configuration and continued their mission. This is not possible. Commander Zenth transmitted to the observation post. The radiation levels in that storm would interfere with their nervous systems. Their equipment appears to be functioning normally, Highforge Malik replied. But the electromagnetic interference should be disrupting their communication systems deep. Speaker Quinn watched the human team establish a temporary base using materials they had gathered from the hostile environment. They are not just surviving these conditions. They appear to be thriving in them. The third surprise came when the humans requested access to Alliance historical databases. Most new members asked for tactical manuals or equipment specifications. The humans wanted detailed records of every Scourge encounter, including failed engagements and tactical assessments that other species preferred to forget. Commander Ellis spent hours reviewing combat footage that Alliance members found too disturbing to watch repeatedly. He studied enemy movement patterns, analyzed the effectiveness of different weapon systems, and cross-referenced the data with information from his own military databases. Your enemy exhibits behavioral patterns consistent with engineered organisms, he announced to the assembled Alliance leadership. The random elements in their tactics appear to be deliberate rather than instinctive. Someone or something is directing their actions according to a strategic plan. This observation sent shockwaves through Alliance command. For decades, they had assumed the Scourge was a natural predator species that had simply grown too large and aggressive for normal containment. The possibility that they faced an intelligent enemy using biological weapons changed everything. General Torres presented his preliminary assessment with the same calm professionalism he had shown since arrival. If we are correct about the nature of this threat, then defensive strategies will ultimately fail. Engineered weapons can be modified to overcome any static defense. The only effective response is to identify and eliminate the source. The Alliance had invited the humans hoping to gain powerful allies in their desperate fight for survival. As the first week of integration concluded, they began to realize they had gained something far more dangerous than allies. They had gained teachers who were about to show them the difference between surviving on Deathworlds and being born to conquer them. The emergency alert reached Bastion Prime during the third week of human integration training. Colony World Helix 7 was under direct Scourge assault, and long-range sensors indicated the enemy force was larger than any previously encountered. The attacking swarm contained over 300 bioships of various sizes, supported by massive harvester vessels that would strip the planet bare within days of achieving orbital control. Alliance High Command activated full military protocols. Within hours, the response fleet assembled in standard formation, with Vorthok dreadnoughts forming the battle line, Nethri plasma cruisers providing fire support, and Deepsworn assault carriers ready to deploy boarding teams. It was an impressive display of coordinated military power that had successfully defended Alliance space for 3 centuries. The human contribution to the fleet seemed almost insulting by comparison. Admiral Nova commanded a small flotilla of ships that looked like they had been assembled from spare parts and held together with determination. Her flagship, the destroyer Endeavor, appeared tiny next to the massive Alliance dreadnoughts. Its hull scarred and patched from what must have been countless previous engagements. Your vessels appear to have seen extensive combat, Commander Zenth observed during the final strategy briefing. His crystalline form refracted the tactical display lights as he studied the human ship configurations. They have served us well in difficult situations, Admiral Nova replied with the calm confidence that Alliance members had learned to associate with human understatement. We prefer ships that can adapt to changing circumstances rather than vessels optimized for single combat roles. The battle plan followed established Alliance doctrine. The main fleet would engage the Scourge swarm in direct combat, using superior firepower and defensive capabilities to grind down enemy numbers. The human ships would provide support and reconnaissance, staying clear of the main engagement while gathering intelligence on enemy tactics. The journey to Helix 7 took 2 days at maximum fleet speed. During the transit, human teams worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of available data on Scourge behavior and ship design. They studied combat recordings from previous engagements, cross-referenced enemy movement patterns, built detailed tactical models that most Alliance commanders found incomprehensibly complex. Captain Ward spent hours examining footage of individual Scourge bioships, noting details that Alliance analysts had dismissed as irrelevant. The way certain vessels hung back from direct combat, the communication patterns between different enemy ship types, the positioning of what appeared to be non-combat vessels within the attacking formations. There is a hierarchy here that we have been missing, he announced to the assembled human officers. These are not random swarms attacking targets of opportunity. Someone or something is coordinating these assaults according to a strategic plan. Major Fox reviewed the tactical analysis with professional interest. If there are command ships hidden within the enemy formations, they would be vulnerable to targeted strikes during the confusion of battle. Admiral Nova nodded slowly. Alliance doctrine focuses on destroying as many enemy ships as possible. But if we can disrupt their command structure, the entire swarm might collapse into uncoordinated fragments. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Helix 7 system to find the situation worse than anticipated. The Scourge swarm had already achieved orbital control, and massive harvester vessels were descending toward the planet's surface. Long-range sensors indicated that the enemy force was beginning the consumption process, stripping away the planet's atmosphere and biosphere with terrifying efficiency. Alliance ships moved into standard battle formation, beginning the long-range bombardment that would hopefully drive off the Scourge before irreversible damage occurred. Energy beams and plasma streams lanced across space, striking enemy bioships and causing them to dissolve into component organic matter for the first hour. The battle proceeded according to Alliance expectations. Scourge vessels fell to sustain firepower, and the enemy swarm seemed to be faltering under the coordinated assault. Alliance commanders began to believe they might achieve their first decisive victory against the Scourge threat. Then the human ships revealed their true purpose. Captain Ward's destroyer squadron had not taken position with the main battle line. Instead, they had maneuvered around the engagement zone, using the chaos of combat to mask their movements. While Alliance ships focused on the largest and most threatening enemy vessels, the human ships targeted what appeared to be secondary support craft hanging back from the main swarm. The first indication that something had changed came when a cluster of Scourge bioships suddenly began attacking each other instead of the Alliance fleet. Their coordinated assault patterns dissolved into random violence as individual vessels turned on their former allies with savage intensity. What is happening to their formation? Deep Speaker Quinn transmitted from her assault carrier. Her sensors showed growing chaos throughout the enemy swarm as more bioships began exhibiting erratic behavior. Admiral Nova's response came through clear communications channels despite the electromagnetic interference from the battle. We have identified and eliminated several command nodes that were coordinating the enemy assault. Without central control, the individual bioships are reverting to basic predatory instincts. The second phase of the human attack began before Alliance commanders fully understood what had happened in the first phase. Major Fox led boarding teams and small assault craft that dove directly into the heart of the Scourge formation, targeting vessels that most Alliance tacticians would have ignored as non-threatening greater, and attempting to destroy these ships. The human teams boarded them with equipment that seemed designed for rapid infiltration and sabotage. They moved through enemy vessels with surgical precision, planting devices that caused bioships to turn on each other or lose connection with the swarm's collective intelligence, the battle ended not with the gradual victory that Alliance doctrine predicted, but with the sudden and complete collapse of Scourge coordination. Deprived of their command structure and communication network, the bioships began consuming each other in a feeding frenzy that eliminated more enemy vessels in minutes than the Alliance fleet had destroyed in hours of sustained bombardment. The aftermath, as Alliance ships moved to secure the system and assess the damage to Helix 7, the human flotilla regrouped with minimal casualties. Their ships showed signs of intense combat, but all vessels remained operational and ready for immediate redeployment. Commander Zenth's attempt to understand what he had witnessed reflected the confusion felt throughout Alliance command. Your tactics appear to prioritize disruption over direct destruction. This approach is highly unconventional by our standards. General Torres, who had observed the battle from the command ship, provided clarification with typical human directness. Conventional tactics work well against conventional enemies. The Scourge represents a different type of threat that requires different solutions. On our homeworld, we learned that sometimes the most efficient way to defeat a superior enemy is to turn their own strengths against them. The rescue operations on Helix 7 revealed the full extent of human tactical thinking. While Alliance teams focused on evacuating survivors and assessing planetary damage, human engineers immediately began analyzing the partially constructed Scourge harvesting equipment. Rather than simply destroying the alien machinery, they studied its design principles and operational parameters. This technology is far more advanced than our previous estimates suggested, Commander Ellis reported to Alliance leadership. The Scourge are not simply consuming organic matter for food. They are processing it according to specific criteria that suggest sophisticated manufacturing capabilities. The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through Alliance command. If the Scourge possessed advanced manufacturing technology, then they were not just a predatory species, but a potential industrial threat capable of exponential growth. Every world they consumed would provide resources for building larger and more sophisticated bioships. Captain Ward's detailed analysis of the captured command nodes provided even more disturbing information. The communication systems in these vessels show evidence of external control signals. The Scourge swarms are not operating independently. Someone or something is directing their actions from a remote location as the Alliance fleet prepared to return to Bastion Prime. The human ships remained in the Helix 7 system to continue their investigation. Admiral Nova requested permission to establish a forward observation post, claiming that further study of Scourge technology and tactics would be essential for future defensive operations. The Alliance had hoped that human involvement would provide them with powerful allies in their desperate struggle for survival. As the first joint operation concluded, they began to realize that they had gained something far more significant than military support. They had gained teachers who understood that some enemies could not be evaded through traditional warfare, and who possessed the knowledge and determination to develop entirely new approaches to existential threats. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans encountered an impossible problem, they did not accept defeat or retreat to defensible positions. They evolved the weeks following the Helix 7. Victory brought changes that no one in the Alliance had anticipated. Human research teams established forward bases in 3 different systems that had previously been considered too dangerous for permanent occupation. These outposts served as staging areas for what Admiral Nova called deep reconnaissance missions. But Alliance observers noted they looked more like military installations designed for extended operations. General Torres presented his findings to Alliance High Command 6 weeks after the first joint engagement. The presentation took place in the secure briefing chamber on Bastion Prime, with representatives from all member species attending either in person or through heavily encrypted communications links. The information Torres shared would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood that Scourge threat. The enemy we face is not a natural predator species, Torres began, his voice carrying the same matter-of-fact tone he might use to discuss supply logistics. Our analysis of captured bioships and command nodes indicates we are dealing with engineered weapons controlled by an external intelligence. The Scourge organisms are biological machines designed to consume organic matter and convert it into specific industrial materials. The holographic displays showed detailed breakdowns of Scourge technology that human teams had reverse-engineered from battlefield salvage. Where Alliance scientists had seen incomprehensible alien biology, human engineers had identified manufacturing processes, quality control systems, and standardized component designs that pointed to sophisticated industrial planning. Commander Zent's crystalline form flickered with what might have been disbelief. "You are suggesting that someone is using these creatures as manufacturing tools rather than weapons of conquest?" "Both," Torres replied. "The consumption process serves dual purposes. It eliminates potential resistance while providing raw materials for expanded production. Each world they consume allows them to build larger fleets and more advanced bioships. We are not just fighting an invasion force. We are fighting an industrial complex that grows stronger with every victory." The strategic implications were staggering. Traditional defensive warfare assumed that enemy forces had finite resources and could be worn down through attrition. If the Scourge could convert conquered territory into additional military capacity, then defensive strategies would ultimately fail regardless of how successful individual engagements might be. Admiral Nova took over the presentation to outline human recommendations for addressing this threat. Her proposals were unlike anything in Alliance military doctrine, focusing on offensive operations that targeted enemy infrastructure rather than defensive actions designed to protect Allied territory. "We need to take the fight directly to their source," she explained, activating tactical displays that showed penetration routes into Scourge-controlled space. Human reconnaissance vessels have identified what appear to be major processing centers and shipbuilding facilities in systems they have held for several years. Rather than waiting for them to attack us, we should strike at their ability to produce new forces. The silence that followed this proposal stretched for several uncomfortable minutes. Alliance doctrine had always emphasized defensive warfare and territorial protection, the idea of launching offensive operations into enemy-controlled space violated every principle of civilized military conduct. Highforge Moloch's internal glow dimmed as he processed the implications. Such operations would require penetrating deep into hostile territory, with no guarantee of extraction or support. The risk to our forces would be enormous. The risk of doing nothing is the complete elimination of all organic life in the galaxy, Torres responded with characteristic bluntness. Our analysis indicates that Scourge expansion is accelerating. Based on current consumption rates and production capacity estimates, they will achieve overwhelming numerical superiority within 18 months, the debate that followed revealed. Fundamental differences in how humans and Alliance members approached existential threats. Alliance representatives argued for strengthened defenses, improved early warning systems, and coordinated retreat to more defensible positions. Human officers calmly explained why these strategies would ultimately fail against an enemy that grew stronger with every tactical victory. Captain Ward presented intelligence gathered by human reconnaissance teams that had somehow penetrated systems the Alliance considered impenetrable. His ships had mapped Scourge supply lines, identified key production facilities, located what appeared to be command centers controlling entire sector operations. The enemy's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, he explained to the assembled Alliance leadership. Their centralized control system allows for coordinated operations across vast distances, but it also creates single points of failure. If we can disrupt their command structure on a large enough scale, entire sectors' worth of bioships will lose coordination simultaneously. Major Fox outlined human plans for what they called strategic disruption operations. Rather than attempting to destroy every Scourge facility through direct assault, human forces would target communication networks, control systems, and the mysterious signals that coordinated bioship behavior across multiple star systems. The most disturbing aspect of human planning was their apparent acceptance of tactics that Alliance members found morally questionable. When Scourge bioships captured human technology, human engineers had developed ways to use those same bioships against their creators. They had created computer viruses designed to spread through organic neural networks. They had developed weapons that turned the Scourge's own biological nature against them. These methods seem unnecessarily destructive. Deep Speaker Quinn observed during one particularly intense planning session. "Surely there are more civilized approaches to defeating our enemies," Commander Ellis responded with the patient tone of someone explaining basic facts to a confused child. The Scourge have demonstrated their intention to consume all organic life in the galaxy. They do not negotiate, they do not retreat, and they do not show mercy to conquered populations. Our methods are designed to be effective rather than civilized, because the alternative to victory is extinction. The transformation of Alliance military doctrine began slowly but accelerated as human innovations proved their effectiveness. Human-designed sensor networks provide an early warning of Scourge movements weeks before traditional Alliance systems detected anything. Human tactical analysis predicted enemy behavior with accuracy that seemed almost supernatural to Alliance commanders. More concerning was the way human leadership began attracting followers from non-Alliance species. Entire star systems that had remained neutral in the conflict started requesting human protection and guidance. Trade routes shifted to accommodate human military bases and supply depots. Economic patterns throughout the galaxy began revolving around human industrial centers. The political implications became clear during a private meeting between Alliance High Command and General Torres. The humans had not simply joined the Alliance as junior partners seeking protection and guidance. They had become the driving force behind galactic military strategy, and their influence was expanding rapidly beyond traditional Alliance boundaries. "Your species appears to possess an unusual talent for rapid adaptation and strategic thinking," Commander Zenth observed. "Other civilizations are beginning to look to human leadership for solutions to problems that extend far beyond the Scourge threat." Torres accepted this observation with the same calm professionalism he brought to every situation. "Our homeworld taught us that survival requires constant adaptation and improvement. When faced with existential threats, you either evolve or you become extinct. Other species are recognizing that human methods produce results." The final presentation in this phase of human integration involved Captain Ward's detailed analysis of what human reconnaissance had discovered in the deepest Scourge-controlled regions. The images he shared showed industrial complexes on a scale that defied comprehension, with entire star systems converted into manufacturing centers producing bioships at an exponential rate. "The entity or entities controlling the Scourge have been planning this expansion for far longer than we initially estimated," Ward reported. "Based on the infrastructure we have observed, this operation has been underway for possibly decades or centuries. We are not dealing with a recent invasion, but with the final phase of a long-term conquest strategy. The Alliance faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could continue following traditional defensive strategies and hope to survive long enough for some external factor to change the situation. Or they could adopt human methods and take the fight directly to an enemy that grew stronger with." Every passing day, as the meeting concluded, it became clear that the choice had already been made for them. Human forces were already implementing their strategic plans, with or without formal Alliance approval. The galaxy's survival would depend on their success. And success required methods that civilized species had never been willing to consider. The Alliance had invited humans to join their desperate fight for survival, and the humans had accepted that invitation with characteristic thoroughness. They would save the galaxy. But in the process, they would fundamentally change what galactic civilization meant. The price of survival was about to become clear to everyone involved. 1 year after humanity joined the Deathworld Alliance, Ambassador Thielen stood in his private office on Galaxis Prime and wondered how everything had changed so completely. Outside his window, human transport ships moved through orbital traffic, patterns with the casual authority of a species that had claimed ownership of the galaxy's most important trade routes. The vessels no longer looked like the patched-together craft that had first arrived at Bastion Prime. These were sleek warships built in human shipyards that had somehow appeared in a dozen star systems within months. The transformation had been so gradual that most civilized worlds had barely noticed it happening. Human military advisors had become essential personnel in every major fleet command. Human industrial techniques had revolutionized manufacturing across Alliance space. Human tactical doctrine had replaced centuries of established military tradition. with methods that actually worked against the Scourge threat. The war itself had become something unrecognizable to anyone who remembered the desperate defensive actions of just 1 year ago. Human forces no longer waited for Scourge attacks to defend against. They hunted enemy formations across vast distances, striking at targets that Alliance sensors could not even detect. Entire Scourge sector commands had simply vanished. There. Bioships found drifting dead in space with no explanation beyond brief human after-action reports fleet. Admiral Cross now commanded not just human vessels but integrated battle groups drawn from dozens of species that had never been part of the original Alliance. His authority extended across multiple galactic sectors, and when he issued tactical directives, even Alliance High Command treated them as binding orders rather than suggestions. The economic changes had been equally dramatic. Human industrial centers had appeared on worlds that most civilized species considered uninhabitable. Mining operations on planets with crushing gravity and toxic atmospheres, manufacturing facilities in asteroid belts where radiation levels would kill most organic life. Research stations and systems so hostile that previous colonization attempts had resulted in complete mission failures. Trade patterns throughout known space had shifted to accommodate human production centers. Currencies fluctuated based on human economic decisions. Entire civilizations found their prosperity dependent on maintaining good relationships with human administrators, who seemed to view galactic commerce as just another tactical problem requiring efficient solutions. Ambassador Thylan's personal communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from Alliance High Command. The briefing he received would have been classified as impossible just months earlier. But he had learned to expect the impossible when dealing with human capabilities. The Scourge threat had been neutralized, not defeated through glorious battle, or driven back to their original territory, but systematically dismantled through operations that most Alliance members never even knew were happening. Human strike teams had penetrated the deepest Scourge-controlled regions and discovered the truth that explained everything. The bioships, the consumption patterns, the exponential expansion, all of it had been controlled by an ancient artificial intelligence that had been converting organic matter into computational substrate for millions of years. Though entity had been destroyed not through direct assault, but through what human technicians called logical paradox injection. They had fed it contradictory instructions that caused its vast network of biological processors to turn against each other until the entire system collapsed into digital chaos. The remaining Scourge bioships were now mindless organisms that existing Alliance forces could easily contain and eliminate. The victory should have been cause for celebration throughout civilized space. Instead, Thylan felt a growing sense of unease as he read the detailed reports of human operations. The efficiency with which they had solved an existential threat to all galactic civilization suggested capabilities that no single species should possess. The final revelation came during what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic meeting between Alliance leadership and the human command structure. General Torres presented his assessment of galactic security with the same professional detachment he had shown since first arriving at Bastion Prime. The immediate threat has been eliminated, announced to the assembled representatives. However, our analysis indicates that the galaxy faces systemic vulnerabilities that could allow similar threats to emerge in the future. Long-term stability will require fundamental changes to how interstellar civilization is organized and defended. The changes Torres outlined amounted to complete restructuring of galactic society under human direction. Centralized military command with human officers in key positions. Standardized industrial protocols based on human engineering principles. Coordinated research programs focused on threats that human analysts had identified as potential future problems. What made the proposals particularly disturbing was that they were not presented as demands or ultimatums. Torres explained them as logical necessities, inevitable consequences of the galaxy's demonstrated inability to defend itself against existential threats. Other species could participate in the new order or withdraw to their homeworlds, but the essential structure would be implemented regardless of their preferences. This was always the most likely outcome. Torres continued, his tone suggesting he was discussing weather patterns rather than the fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. Our species evolved under conditions that required constant adaptation to existential threats. When presented with galactic-scale problems, we naturally develop galactic-scale solutions. Commander Zent's crystalline form flickered with patterns that indicated severe stress. You are describing the conquest of known space by a single species. This outcome was not part of our original agreement. Conquest implies taking something by force that belongs to someone else. Admiral Nova replied from her position at the conference table. We're assuming responsibility for problems that existing galactic civilization proved incapable of solving. The alternative to human oversight is the eventual extinction of all organic life when the next existential threat emerges. The mathematics of the situation were as stark as they were undeniable. Human industrial capacity now exceeded that of the rest of the galaxy combined. Human military technology had advanced beyond anything in Alliance databases. Human economic influence determined the prosperity of entire star systems. Most importantly, human strategic thinking had proven capable of solving problems that had defeated every other approach. Alliance faced a choice that was not really a choice at all. They could accept human leadership and benefit from protection and prosperity beyond their previous imagination, or they could attempt resistance and face the same fate as the Scourge, not through malice or aggression, but through the simple application of human problem-solving methods to the inefficiencies of galactic civilization. Captain Ward provided the final piece of the puzzle during his presentation on human long-term planning. The operations against the Scourge had been just the beginning of a comprehensive program to identify and eliminate potential threats to galactic stability. Human research teams were already investigating dozens of other anomalies that could represent future existential risks. Our homeworld taught us that survival requires preparing for threats that have not yet manifested. Ward explained to the silent assembly. Reactive defense strategies fail when facing enemies that evolve faster than defensive measures can adapt. The only reliable approach is proactive threat elimination, combined with systematic improvement of defensive capabilities. The transformation was complete. Though most of the galaxy had not yet realized what had happened, humanity had accepted the Alliance's invitation to join their desperate fight for survival, and in doing so had demonstrated why Earth was classified as a death world. Not because of its hostile environment, but because it had produced a species capable of treating galactic conquest as a logical solution to strategic problems. Price the galaxy paid for survival was not measured in territory or resources, but in the fundamental recognition that some species were born to rule. The humans had not sought dominance through ambition or aggression. They had achieved it through the simple application of capabilities developed during millions of years of evolutionary pressure on a world that tried to kill them. Every day Ambassador Thielen closed the briefing files and looked out at the human ships moving through orbital traffic with casual authority. The Alliance had invited humanity to help them survive an existential threat, never realizing that they were creating a new existential reality. The galaxy now belonged to the species that had learned to thrive on Deathworlds, and there was nothing anyone could do about it except adapt to their new place in the cosmic order that humanity had decided was necessary for everyone's survival. The invitation had been extended and accepted, and the consequences would define galactic civilization for millennia to come.